Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. This is the show where we answer your technical questions as they relate to media and event production. Today's our focus on Audio Day, so make sure you get your questions in. You can go to askofficehours.global or sign up for the newsletter and find all the information that you need to either become a panelist or use our Mukana Q&A system. Let's dive into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
Our first one comes in this morning from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul says, for sending and receiving packages for your production business, do you prefer FedEx, DHL, UPS, USPS, or other?
Courtney.
It depends on the timeliness of the package, whether they need it right away the next day, where they're located. I would use different carriers for different. I use DHL if it's international. FedEx, if it has to be there overnight, absolutely positively has to be there overnight. And UPS, if it can be there in 2 days. I do not use the United States Postal Service for shipping anything that is critical.
Go ahead, Mickey.
For the most part, I use FedEx, simply because a lot of the vendors that we work with tend to use FedEx as well. So I just followed suit. And I agree. I never use USPS or any or even the Philippine Postal Service. Definitely not the Philippine Postal Service for anything important.
Alex?
Yeah, FedEx is usually what we use for most of what we're sending out, and even receiving. A lot of times I'll choose that if I'm choosing if it's $2 more from B&H, I'll usually pick FedEx just because we found it to be the most reliable. Also, we can send it. One thing to know is that if you're trying to send something, you're on the road, you can always send it to a FedEx Kinko's location. Not all of them will receive, but most of them will. So a lot of times we find there's a lot of Kinko's around, a lot of FedEx. So if you're doing FedEx, a lot of times you can. I had a bunch of stuff sent to me from B&H last week during a production. We needed a couple little things to glue things together, and we just had them all sent to somewhere that was 5 minutes from our hotel. It's better to send it to a FedEx location than it is to the hotel itself, depending on the hotel. But generally, it's better to do that. It keeps its tracks better. So FedEx is normally the way that we do it. Now, in some countries, you have to kind of talk to people that you know locally. DHL sometimes, for instance, in Africa, does a little bit better as far as reliability. FedEx's connection to their local vendors is a little looser in Africa than it is here, or it has been in the past. And so that tends to, DHL, we found, did better in some countries, and you just have to kind of know. This has a lot to do with who they know and who they're friends with, of how things get through customs and so on and so forth. That all oftentimes depends on a country by country basis. To move large amounts of gear around, we use a company called Rocket. Rocket is well known. I was at Rocklittitz, and Rocket has an entire office there. Like the warehouse there to move things around. So Rocket is what we use there. And then in the worst case scenario, I just did this last week, we use media passes and check things. And so we checked about 12 bags, last week, 12 Pelican cases, which takes a little bit of a thought process. But in most cases, whether it's Southwest or United or others, you'll pay somewhere between $50 to $75 a bag, up to 100 pounds if you have a media pass and you have Pelican cases.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Peter Moore down in Auckland, New Zealand. Peter says, AI-generated music is starting to flood Spotify. It's now possible for Spotify to have internal staff creating, using AI tools to generate music, and marketing fake artists, in quotes, which Spotify makes 100% of the revenue as the creator. Thoughts?
This makes me sad as a musician. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, my first thought is Spotify's the devil, but we'll shelve that idea. So yeah, it's happening. Even with my catalogs, I used Epidemic Sound for years, and I've gotten into like Suno and Udify and some of these other AI music tools, and now I'm making background music that's my own, and I'm finding myself using stuff like Epidemic Sound or even YouTube's music tools where copyright could come into play a lot less. And for Spotify, yeah, it makes sense because they're out to make money. And if they can build up their artists, it's no different than a AI Instagram artist out there. So you just got to be very careful and see what you're choosing and how you're choosing it. AI can be a great thing, and yeah, AI can also be the devil.
Jesse?
If people only gathered around fire for heat, why do we have so many bonfire parties in the summer? People don't gather around music just for the songs. They gather around it for the community and for the artists at the center of that music. So Spotify is absolutely free to do this. I would like to encourage Spotify to look at Facebook 10 years ago and Facebook today and see what happens when you just fill up your stream with AI gobbledygook and how that affects your community and your revenue.
Courtney?
Yeah, I've been seeing this a lot on YouTube. I don't have Spotify, but I tell you what, my YouTube feed has become flooded with these AI-generated videos. They're usually clickbait. They have, here's one that says, iconic blazing saddle scene was entirely improvised. And you click on it, and it's always different companies calling. Here's one called Prime Discovery, and they're all AI written. They're all AI read by an AI announcer that sounds just like Bill Davis, and they're all 30 minutes, 28 to 30 minutes long, and whatever is highlighted in the thumbnail is not revealed to the last 12 seconds of the video. So they're clickbait that gets you to try and listen or watch through the entire video. And I don't know where these are coming out of, if these are being generated by a bot somewhere in Russia or somewhere just to monetize, thousands of videos like this with clickbait and 30 minutes long. So I can see the reason for creating these, but I just hate them because they are now everything that's in there. I carefully look at the length of every video before I click on it.
Alex?
It's really interesting. I have almost none of that, and I have almost no AI in my For You page or my homepage so I'm curious as to, it'd be interesting to see how the algorithm. Do you have a lot of subscriptions, Courtney? Do you subscribe to a lot of channels?
I've subscribed to none of the. No, I only have about 4 or 5 subscriptions, and these. If you click on one and watch it to the end, then it's going to fill your next.
Yeah, no, 100%. If you click on a movie and watch all the way through it, you're definitely going to get to it. Even if you skip through to the end, you're telling the algorithm that you're interested. I have about 160 subscriptions, and I think that what happens is that it is that my subscriptions overwhelm any of the algorithm because it's generally leaning towards those subscriptions, and I watch a lot of things very mechanically. Like I watch lots of trailers, and so I get a lot of that. I think it depends on how you use it, but if you have a lot of subscriptions, you don't get that. Same thing with Spotify. Well, I don't use Spotify, but for Apple Music, I know that the thing for me is that, and I think that a lot of those movies, by the way, they're trying to get into autoplay as well, because they're just it just serves it up. You forget that it's on, and they're taking advantage of people letting them run through, and it's, getting minutes out of that. I know with Apple Music, a lot of what I do to discover new music is I play a song that I like, and then I just see what the algorithm hands back. Apple gave me a singer-songwriter yesterday that she doesn't have a website. Like it was like she's popular on TikTok, that's it, and the algorithm has gotten extremely good at finding the music that you like, going through that. And as a result, I don't really, and I don't know if Apple Music's tighter than Spotify. It might be. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't much tighter as far as how you submit stuff. But I will say that I don't hear anything that's AI generated. It's all, but most of what I listen to is like international and singer-songwriters. And so I think that may be the piece there, but I think it definitely depends on how you use it. But I think there's a lot of this flushing around in Spotify. I just don't know who's hearing it, because if you're using the algorithm effectively, you wouldn't hear much outside of that. It's an interesting puzzle.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and here's his question. How can teams balance fostering strong connections with maintaining professional boundaries in hybrid remote work? Strategies for managers and or peers to avoid over-dependency while ensuring adequate support.
Alex?
I mean, a lot of things we've done in the past. Pixelcore was stretched out a long way, and I know is completely, we have an office, but we mostly interact, and a lot of it has to do with meetings, texts, kind of constant communication between the teams. I know that with Pixelcore, we had a DC office, and we had a room in our San Rafael office that had a window to the DC office. So you could literally, if I wanted to talk to Greg or or anyone else at the DC office, I can just walk in and sit down and talk, and they'd be there, except for lunchtime or whatever. But they'd be there. It'd be as if they had an open door, and we found that to be relatively effective at that. And then also, periodic get-togethers where we did, expend the money to bring people together, so they knew what they're like physically, in what they're there, and so we try to do that even now. So anyway, you'll see me when I'm traveling trying to do meetups just to meet people in office hours and in person. So those are the kind of things that we did in the past.
Chris.
Yeah, I would say for me, at least in my experience and in my work, it's not a whole lot different whether, regarding remote work to, like in person. I think it's just a general call of everybody just choosing to communicate well and really pay attention to what the end goals are for what you're doing. That's the real thing, is regardless of remote or together, there's always like an outcome that people are shooting for. So it's just a matter of really understanding what that is and making sure that everybody on your team is working together to achieve that.
Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. When iPhone messages are enabled on a linked Mac, does the Mac only display iMessages or SMS as well?
Mickey?
Yeah, they show, if you, assuming you're using an iPhone, they show SMS messages as well, and I prefer to, if I'm at my computer and I get a text message, I prefer to just reply on the computer as opposed to using the small phone keyboard.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think this is getting more sophisticated too. We just recently had a spate of updates on both iOS and Mac OS, and I was noticing that the other day I started getting pings on one of the screens of my computer saying, Discord is an option now to export this file to. Do you want to export it to Discord? And I went, I didn't even know my Discord was linked into anything. So I think as Apple gets those two OSs, iOS and Mac OS together, we're seeing more cross delivery of data. It seems like it's coming together. There used to be two completely separate camps, and the stuff in iOS never reached the stuff in Mac OS and which I think they're creating bridges between those services. So I'm seeing more and more of messages from one system will appear on the other one in an intelligent way, enabled by Apple in the background. So it's something I'm just having to get used to. I think we're going to get more cross-pollination like that inside a particular environment.
Jeff?
Now, I'm having... That's okay. I'm having a little bit more different experience than Mickey's having because I don't get anything other than a iPhone message through my messages. And the reason why is because it's got to go through iCloud. There's got to be some level of security through it. So you can't just send text messages and expect other programs to start picking it up, because when you're doing things like getting two-factor authentication, you don't want somebody hijacking that text message to put in the PIN so they can take over your account. So there is ways that you can bring in other things, and that's through the settings. You can bring in your phone, you can bring in email messages, but yeah, I've never had a green box message or Android phone or anything like that ever cross through into my messages on Mac.
Alex?
You can connect your phone to your Mac. So if you connect your cellular phone to your and make that number available, it will move text messages to your Mac. I don't do that, but I know that I can. So generally, I keep all my keep it all in messages on my Mac. But I have a handful of people that text me and from an Android phone, probably 2 or 3 people. But I check my phone for that. I just don't like it littering my Mac. But I definitely have done it. So you can attach your phone to your Mac as a valid number, and it's using the cellular of your phone to capture that and then send it to the Mac.
Mickey?
Yeah, just to add to what Alex mentioned, it is a setting that you have to set on the iPhone itself. I don't recall off the top of my head how it's labeled, but it's within the messages settings in the iPhone. Yeah.
All right, next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Google's NotebookLM now offers an audio overview feature that turns your uploaded documents, PDFs, or pasted content into two-way podcast-style discussions between two AI hosts. Comment.
That sounds sort of interesting. Alex, do you have any experience with this?
I don't have any experience. I think reading it, I think that for me, I have PDF documents so that I can scan them so that I don't have to listen to someone talk about them. The idea of having someone discuss this when I was able to just find the information that I was looking for does not sound exciting to me.
Courtney, what do you think?
Well, the nice thing is that you can tell it to summarize. So if you get one of those really long interviews or something that is the problem is you have to use text. It only supports PDFs, texts, or Markdown. There are 3 different types of file formats. So whatever it is, you have to convert that file to one of those 3 formats if you don't have it as a PDF, text, or a Markdown file. And then it will, paste it in there. Then you can have it summarize it and then do the summarization as a back and forth, so it makes it a little more interesting to listen to. But if you're looking for information quickly, it kind of goes against the purpose of the summarization and the use of AI to pull information, like Alex said, or just search, when were they talking about this? And it'll just search, will find that stuff in a long text file, and we'll skip over everything else. So this kind of, if you still want to listen to it, if you're out in your car or something where you can't really pay attention to your app or your phone or your tablet, it might be good for that because it'll present it in an entertaining way while you're driving and maybe keep you awake. But other than that, it's of little use to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know if even if I use this and made this into a podcast, if I took a manual and made it into an audio podcast, I don't know if that would keep me awake while driving, because usually these technical manuals are so dry, I feel like I would just fall asleep at the wheel doing it. And usually when I read manuals, and I love to read documentation, I'm usually reading a specific section of that documentation to answer a specific problem or find a solution to a problem that I have. So I too, I don't think I would have a lot of use for this, but hey, maybe somebody else does. Courtney, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I was going to say what they next need to do is kind of have a little checkbox that says insert comedy writer, so that every now and then, it'll make up a comedy joke about the subject matter and inject it as the goofy podcast person in there that doesn't really come from the text that's there. It's just a goofy question about it or something.
Yeah, AI comedian. That's a scary thought. Next question.
Optional rim shots. Mariella Sushamiro and Webelow. Mickey, Jeff, and the panel, what in-ears were Snoop and Dre using on the beach for the Olympics, and how did it work with the wireless? They looked different from the ones everyone else was wearing. Simple, small, and black, and not like JK Audios. Thanks, peeps.
Mickey.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what they use, but the good guesses would be companies like JH Audio, 64 Audio, Ultimate Ears, although Ultimate Ears kind of are doing more consumer grade products now. Also, Westone makes custom in-ears. The great thing about custom in-ears is that you can fully customize them. You could be whatever color you want, however big or small you need it to be. The number of drivers there you can customize. So that's the great thing about custom in-ear monitors. All of these just use standard the 3.5 millimeter mini jack connectors and plug into standard in-ear monitor receivers.
Chris.
Yeah, just like Mickey just said, I would assume, I don't know exactly, but 64 Audio is like kind of it is just the hot thing, and they make just killer products. So if I had to guess, I would say probably somewhere along that. But again, just as Mickey said, there is a ton of option. There's a ton of models and makers for all of this stuff. And as far as in-ears, I mean, this is very, very customizable, which is unrelated to the actual like belt packs and transmitters and receivers and of all the actual wireless. So there's a lot of interchangeable parts to customize just what your personally fitted ears might be or whatever, and still connect to all this other gear. So.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand's up next. Debugging MIDI messages. I noticed my MIDI-equipped effects units, pedals, and foot switches send system-exclusive messages via my synths, sending channel-specific data with note on-off. What note? C4, 48, C5, 72, etc. Even volume change on the amp is SYSEX. Is this normal behavior?
Mickey.
Yeah, a lot of even modern MIDI products still use their own proprietary messaging protocol instead of using the standards. The great thing about standards, there's so many of them. Instead of using standard messaging protocols, a lot of these companies prefer that you purchase their own programming tools as opposed to running something else to send messages to it. But take a look at the documentation for the products. Some of them may have the ability to switch the MIDI messaging mode from SYSEX to, CC, or depending on what type of MIDI device it is, Mackie or Huey. Most likely it would be CC, but take a look and see if they're switchable.
Courtney?
I think this is normal behavior because MIDI works, it's a common bus, and so it's sending out the note information. It's flooding everyone gets the note information because it's possible to use a single MIDI keyboard to send the notes that you're playing to 6 or 7 different synths at the same time to have them play in a chorus or to sweeten the sound. So you can send the same keystroke. One keystroke goes to multiple synths. However, things like controlling the volume, stuff specific to that particular item, especially an amplifier or a foot switch, is going to be specific. You want that foot switch to control just one particular synth. That would be a SYSEX message. So it says this is only for this device that's on the MIDI bus, as opposed to everybody can read. Everybody should handle this note or this system exclusive message, which is usually an instructional message or a control message to a particular amplifier, synthesizer, or device.
Yeah, and just to bring in the chat, Douglas Carmichael saying, I would recommend using Bombbox, BOME.com. They have a hardware solution and also a software solution. The MIDI translator software apparently is good for that. So that is another option. So Peter, good luck with the MIDI debugging. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Would there be any sonic benefit to using a Phoenix Audio Theata or similar preamp for my synths before the Allen & Heath SQ-5 console? He's got a link.
Mickey.
Sonic difference, that's certainly a possibility. Sonic benefit, that would be quite subjective. So I'd test it and use your ears, decide for yourself.
Chris.
Yeah, I would just say that when anybody is looking at audio in this, and this is a good thing for everyone to take a second and digest, is that the components of all these different parts. You have a console here which retails for about $4,000, right? And it's a 48-channel console, so I'm assuming 48 actual preamps built into it. So if you take the overall cost of that versus looking at one like decent quality outboard pre, if that console had that quality of preamp, it would cost $10,000 or $50,000 or whatever XYZ thing. So yeah, there's a huge benefit here. One thing you really want to watch out for when you're doubling up is you never really want to go preamp into preamp. And so a lot of these consoles, especially or interfaces, lower budgeted ones, they don't really allow you to get separate line inputs and separate preamps. And they give you combo jacks in a lot of these things. So no matter what, you're going from a preamp into a preamp, so that honestly, yes, you can absolutely hear a sonic difference. That preamp, the quality one, is going to be powering microphones better, and you will absolutely get more benefit from that. But realize that it is going to kind of go back into this other place where it's not 1,000% optimal. In a real situation, these are all line inputs. So you have one preamp powering a microphone, and then it is hitting a line input. Okay, there are mic levels and there are line levels. Mic level is for something that needs to be turned up, right? Microphones are very low output, so they need a lot of gain, versus a keyboard that's plugging directly into something is loud off the bat. So
Mickey, you had another thought?
Yeah, just to add to what Chris just mentioned there, a lot of audio equipment nowadays, modern audio equipment, there is no, well, every single input runs through the preamp circuitry no matter what. There may be a line level or line level / mic level switch, but all that does is adds a pad in line to bring down the line level before feeding it into the preamp. So take that into account, as Chris mentioned.
Yeah, that's all great advice. I haven't actually used this particular product. Now, I will say that Alan, he generally, like the SQ series, they're very good sounding sonically as far as the consoles are concerned. But yeah, if you want to step it up a notch, generally with unbalanced outputs, which synthesizers typically tend to have, I really like these Rupert Neve DI boxes, like this 8-channel box. You see this in a lot of studio and live, especially live setups too. That ensures you get the best sonic quality of that synthesizer going into your console. And of course, it has the classic Rupert Neve transformers on each output as well. So that ensures that you're going to get a nice balanced, clean signal on the way out. These DIs are not cheap from Rupert Neve, but if you want some of the best DI boxes out there, I would highly recommend looking at that product. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith is up next out of Chautauqua, New York. I'm scanning in old pictures and event sheets. Some are longer than the scanner I have. What's a good way to blend them together so that it looks like one solid image? I have both Apple and Windows machines.
Jeffrey.
So what you can do if you have Photoshop, even if you have GIMP, what you can do is you can take both scans, the top part of the scan, the bottom part of the scan, and then have enough buffer. So what you would do is you then bring in the first image and you would make it opaque, about 50%. And then you could take that second and you put it on the layer underneath, and then you can line it up, zoom it in so you can see line for line. Now, the problem is if you don't have it properly lined up, you'll get like a little bend coming out of there. But if you line it up perfectly, you should be able to get the whole thing. And then once you're done, you make the top layer 100%, and then you can cut off any type of line or anything that could happen in there. But the better way to do this nowadays, especially if you have like an iPhone 15, is set your phone settings to the max 48 megapixel, and then actually just take a picture from the phone. You can crop out and align it however you need, but it gets the whole document, and it's a pretty high resolution.
Go ahead, Mickey.
If ever you already have Photoshop, I like using Photoshop's photo merge feature. You can find it, I think, if you click on File and Automation or Automate, you'll find photo merge there, and that's what I typically do for stitching panoramas and also for stitching together larger document scans.
Alex.
And one general purpose thing, whether it's video or audio, lining things up is the difference key. So if you set the top layer as difference, what it shows you is when it's black, there's zero difference. That's a 0. And when it's white, there's total difference, which is a 1. And so when you set it to difference, you can very clearly see what's not matching up, and you simply nudge them until they get to where they are. Now, when you're scanning it, you want to make sure that getting it straight, as Jeffrey alluded to, is one of the more important things, is having it straight on each scan, because it'll make it a lot easier. Otherwise, you might have to rotate it a little bit, but you'll find that difference works well. I also use that to line up frames. So if I have like a line cut and I'm trying to sync all of my ISOs and I don't have time code, a lot of times I'll get them all close and I can just nudge them forward and back until one frame turns black, and that means that I'm on the same place, and so that helps there. I also use it for color correction with charts, where we have a difference key, and I'll do color correction to the target the target chart until it turns black. So difference can be very useful in a lot of different ways.
Guy.
Yeah, depending on how many you have, it might be best to just farm it out. I used to do a lot of this stuff in the mid-90s for a service bureau where we had sophisticated equipment. We had a Canon bubble jet, which would allow us to do 30-inch plus large nautical maps. And so I used to have to splice them together in Photoshop. So that was one way, was scan half, then merge them together in Photoshop. And my Quadra 950 with 128 megs of RAM back in the day, I used to take 250 meg files and splice them together. But nowadays, I'd probably just use my iPhone with, like Jeffrey was saying, the RAW mode. And then if you can, the other way that we would do it at the shop was we had a copy stand, something similar to this. We had monster version of this that was for print. So it took up an entire room. In fact, I used to have a Hasselblad 520C with a digital back that was about 50 grand in all to do this kind of work. So it depends on who if this is going out to print or something like that, you might want to hire the big agencies that have the equipment to do this, because I mean, we had air suction and it would dust free. I mean, it was a crazy environment. So it just depends on to what level that you want to go at this.
Go ahead, Bill.
And just look in, as Jeffrey and Guy just mentioned, look into the world of apps on your phone, because the phones have such high-resolution cameras now. And I know there are a lot of people doing marketing for just take a picture of the scrapbook page, even if it has 6 photos into it. It'll isolate each photo. It'll color correct it. It'll automatically straighten it up and fix the keystoning and whatever. Those algorithms are pretty well known. And in fact, I think the last time I scanned something with my iPhone, just wasn't even thinking about it. Not only did the picture pop up, but a little kind of highlight whip through there, and the next thing I know, I can edit the text from the photo. I mean, that's how much AI is just kind of hidden in the back parts of your phone. So consider thinking, I'm not sure scanning the traditional flatbed scanners, unless you're in print production or something, are going to have that much utility, because these phones are getting so smart and good at this.
Just a reminder that today is a 1-hour Q&A day, so your votes really do matter, and we got questions stacking up. So if you have a moment, please do that. That'll help us make sure we prioritize your questions. Next question.
Robert White in Jacksonville, Florida, need to take stereo audio, a TV headphone feed, and convert it to a clean mono signal. I want both channels in the mono signal. Will the Klark Teknik DI-10P direct box do the trick? Or for 2 times the money, there's the Switchcraft 318 Mini AudioStix.
Mickey, what do you think?
Yeah, just looking at those 2 products, they certainly would do the job. My preference, I'm a big fan of the products by Radial Engineering, so I would recommend the Pro AV1. Though, saying that, like, I don't know what the specific reason is why you need to sum them down to mono. I'd prefer to buy hardware that's capable of doing stereo, and then if I do indeed need to send it out, broadcast it or record it in mono, then I can just sum it at the mixer.
Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, depending on your connections, assuming that you just have like analog outputs from your TV, you could easily just get some kind of an adapter to just sum to mono, just a little cheap cable, and that would probably do a fine job of that as well. But you do want to be careful. I don't know if this is like a thing that you'll regularly be doing, and if this is like regular TV program material, or if this is something that's like a homemade thing, because you really want to watch for phasing. If this is something that was like a DIY kind of a thing, you want to make sure that you're not actually putting things out of phase permanently when you sum to mono. You'll notice it'll be drastically different and not pleasant. So,
Courtney.
Yeah, you want to be careful about that. If you're doing a DIY, you could just like was mentioned, just build your own connector adapter cable, and I would put a resistor, like a 100 ohm resistor, between each one before you sum. The left through a 100 ohm resistor, and then to the single output, and the right through a 100 ohm resistor to the same single output. That way, the 2 amplifiers aren't driving each other and the output of your TV. Or what you could do is get something like this. This is pretty cheap. I didn't look at the price of the other 2 that you mentioned. This is like $34. This is a Behringer ultra low noise channel line mixer. It has a 1/4 inch plugs on the input and lets you mix any of those 4 inputs to a single output. Takes 12 volts in. So something like that could do the trick for you. And that way you'd have adjustment value over the left and right. And so you could, if you want more, if stuff is split up over left and right and you want to hear a little more of whatever's on the left or a little more of whatever's on the right, you can use that to sum the 2. But as was mentioned, make sure that you maintain phase on the input and output. Otherwise, everything that's on the center channel will disappear.
Mickey?
Yeah, the thing with just making a simple cable that just sums the 2 signals together is it will keep it, since this is a headphone output on a TV, this would keep the signal as an unbalanced consumer line level signal. So if you want to do a longer run through, say, XLR that is balanced and also at impedance matched and also level set to a microphone level, you'd want to use a proper DI for that. But yeah, in a pinch, you can just use a simple cable that sums it, make a cable up. But if you want to do it with the best transparency in terms of the signal fidelity, as well as using the noise isolation, having the noise isolation benefits of common mode rejection and balanced connections, then you want the DI.
Some great solutions there to that problem. Hope that helps you out, Robert. Next question.
Francis Frey in Cambridge, Massachusetts says, I'm recording instructional videos with a Sony FX3, a 35mm lens, and an ATEM Mini. I write on an iPad as I teach or display through SuperSource. Audio is an SM7B through a Rodecaster Pro. How should I think about frame rate for these?
Mickey.
When deciding on the frame rate, that's very much a subjective thing. Depends on what type of look you would want to go for. Some say that higher frame rates are a bit more realistic, maybe more visceral. Maybe it feels like you're more there. Lower frame rates, like 24 frames per second, may feel a bit more cinematic. So I would do camera tests with a bunch of different types of motions, more simple, subtle motions, as well as faster motions. Do camera tests at different frame rates, slate each take so that you know exactly what you're viewing, and decide for yourself at what frame rate you want to go for. And once you've decided on something, try to maintain that the entire pipeline from the camera to since you're recording on the ATEM, is set to that specific frame rate so that you're not doing any frame rate conversion throughout your pipeline.
Jesse.
If I had to pick a frame rate right now, I would say start at 30 and consider 60. The iPad should be outputting at 60 hertz, so it should work at 60 or 30. The big trick here is making sure that your camera and your ATEM are set to the same frame rate. If you're working with an ATEM and a Blackmagic, they automatically jam, but to the same frame rate. But if you don't, you might want to go into your ATEM software control. It's pretty easy to find on your camera, but if you're looking for the frame rates on your ATEM software control, go to this little gearbox down here, and then you can choose from your frame rates under video.
Go ahead, Alex.
The first couple hundred MacBreak videos were all done in 24. And the reason I did that was not because I wanted to be cinematic, but I was trying to save space. It was expensive to upload them. So, I mean, if you're doing training stuff, I think that, a 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second would probably be fine. I wouldn't do 24 because it's for a lot of hardware. Number one, if you're putting on any general service, a lot of them will convert it to 30, whether you like it or not. So when you're posting those things, they're not playing it back at the frame rate you're giving it. They're playing it back at a standardized system. So 30 and 60 are really the ones you're choosing from. I will say that there is, especially when I'm doing events, I try to go to 60, even if there's not a lot of movement, because I do feel like it feels more visceral. I think for training, I think that you can decide whether you want to go down that path. I think that the big challenge for training is really how saturated you fill the person's head at the time. So when people aren't saturated, this is a bigger problem than the frame rate. Is when if you give a lecture, there's a temptation to give a lecture and just kind of go along with the lecture, and that is a good step because it means that you're in a closed environment. You look great, you sound great. It's much better than recording the class. And then the class can watch it, and then you can have Q&A. So that's a huge step forward. The next step after that is starting to think about more animation, overlays, and so on and so forth. Now, you may be concerned that means you have to learn After Effects or Motion or something else, but you can do an enormous amount of work with Keynote. So as an educator, really think about how you might be using Keynote, doing little animations and illustrations and so on and so forth. The more you can saturate audio and video, the more likely they're going to understand what's going on. And again, with Keynote, what I'm not talking about is putting up slides. And I know that you know this, Francis, but but I think when we're talking to people in general, if you have more than 20 words on your slide, you should really be thinking hard about your life choices. so like, just don't, like, it's not that I never have more than 20 words on my slides, but it's almost never. In fact, it's rare for me to have more than 5 words on my slides. Generally, these are illustrations that underline what I'm talking about. They're not, I'm not putting anything out there. I'm just putting the hit points of what that is. I watch dense slides from big companies all the time. But the reason I bring that up is that the frame rate is important, but really thinking about the overall structure to maximize the way that a student will absorb the information is probably more important than the frame rate.
Guy?
Yeah, as we were building a product called the One Button Studio, we ran a bunch of tests with 30 versus 60. And one of the things that we found when we added in the Wacom tablet is that at 30, people that drew telestrations fast, it would not keep up, and it would be a little chunkier because of the way that the lines, and especially curves, they would come out, it would be able to keep up. So 60 gave it a nice fluid motion. So I would definitely, if I'm using telestration over the top of video, I would definitely use 60 frames per second.
Jesse?
Just a quick question to the panel. Does anybody believe that 2997 or 5998 are worth exploring, or should you just ignore those completely and go for the full?
5994.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I would say that I generally operate in 2997 and 5994 because all the video equipment tends to line up better with that. So I tend to work with that. The reality is once you get to a YouTube or a Facebook or anything else, they're going to deal with whole frames, but I usually don't bother to convert. I let them do that. I want my entire workflow. I tend to live inside of a 2997 and 5994 world.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. How do you add package sources on a Synology photo system? For example, he's taking Google Photos and Apple Photos, and he wants to get them, I think, onto the web or the network system.
Alex?
I don't think I would do that. So I don't use Google Photos very much, but with Apple Photos, I wouldn't start moving those files out of there. If you're on a Mac, you should let them sync, and you should do it. You should use iCloud for that. It's extremely well developed. Starting to hack through those things, you're going to end up. You can do an incredible amount of damage. Ask me how I know. to your photo library if you start hacking your Apple Photo library. It's a world of hurt. I don't know about Google Photos, but I can tell you in Apple Photos, you just want to use it the way it's designed to be used. If you use it any other way, you're going to end up with chaos. So I'd be very careful of that.
Bill?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Alex, because if you're just trying to take a package contents grouping, which is really just a compressed kind of, it's got all the data, but it's also got metadata and a whole bunch of other things in there, and try to translate it from one to another, it's going to be a disaster, and you'll have way more problem than you want. Now, the other thing, though, I have taken package contents files, which is, again, all the photos plus all the metadata and everything else, and I've double-clicked on them, and it'll find one of my helper programs. I'm not really sure what it's using. It might be using Handbrake. It might be using something else. And it will split them apart and give me a list of all the photos. If your only desire is to get the raw photos content so that you can migrate a big folder of photos into your Synology Photos app, that might be an option for you. But use with caution.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. What's the next step up from an Elgato Prompter? I've read that the screen is less than the best ever.
That's one way of putting it. Alex?
Sorry. I don't have as much problem. I played with one a little bit. I don't have as much problem with the screen. It's okay. It's really that I can't put an HDMI input in. It's designed to only connect to a computer, and that really limited my entire pipeline of how we use teleprompters. And so that we kind of moved away from those. Probably the next step up are the iCan. iCan makes a series of them there. Courtney, who's going to come after me, probably has better solutions. And then the next step up from that is typically for us prompter people. So those are the kind of the two steps past what you're looking at in the Elgato.
Courtney?
That's the problem when Alex goes first. He takes all of your suggestions. I'd also recommend the iCan. Or the prompter people make this 7-inch here that has a 4K 16:9 monitor, even though and it's $800, even though the The glass is parallelogram, which I kind of prefer a trapezoidal glass because it allows you to put a little bit wider lens on because it gets the top corners out of the shot if you have a wide angle lens in there. But the monitor is good here because it's 4K. And here's the important part, 1800 nit monitor. So you'll be able to see that outside, read text outside, and have an image outside that'll contend with sunlight. So if you're going to be using this thing outdoors, and of course it takes an HDMI in, and the other important thing is it flips, you can choose flip left, right in the monitor itself. And this is important if you're going to be driving if you're using it as a teleprompter, or let's say you're driving a camera and a standalone monitor for eye contact off camera to an off camera person who is an interviewer, let's say, and then you want on camera for promos and stuff. That way you can have the same signal hitting two different monitors, one reversed and the other one not reversed. And with the Elgato, the monitor that's on the Elgato appears as an external monitor and it talks to your laptop. So your laptop has to be plugged into that because it uses a virtual video driver, and your computer has to see it as an extended monitor, or a duplicate mirrored monitor, like a separate monitor plugged into your laptop. And so it's not a signal that you can send to multiple monitors. It can only be sent to one monitor. So I'd say prompter people, the Pocket Q V3 4K, which is a high resolution monitor and high brightness, should work good for you.
Jeffrey?
So if this is just for the studio, what I've done is I've taken a portable monitor, like a 15.6-inch portable monitor, and I have one of those cheaper Amazon iPad teleprompters that I set it up there. Yeah, you get a little bit of spillover. You won't be able to see the whole screen, but you can also get software and resize the software so it fits into the screen. And of course, with Mac, there is a piece of software. I can't remember the name of it. I used it, and I still have it somewhere, but you can use that to create multiple virtual monitors to flip the screen over the way you need it to.
Next question.
Next one comes from Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. Budget-friendly recommendations for headphones or in-ear monitors. I want to record a number of people throughout the day, and I know Alex says they should be disposable, so budget-friendly.
Chris?
Hi, Kyle. Well, what I would say is probably Shure 215s are going to be the most affordable and just like solid bet, and then you can get just as many caps and ends in different sizes and shapes till your heart's desire. You can buy really, there's a ton of options as far as sizing and just different designs that are just disposable ends you take off, and you can just kind of move through all your clients throughout the day, and it's hygienic, and there you go.
That's a good one. Jeffrey?
I'll give you a couple options. First of all, we got wired. Amazon.com has several different options. I've done some reviews of them in the past. We talk about Linsole. There's another company called KZ out there. You want to get something, if you really want them to feel comfortable with them having something with 3 drivers is going to be your best bet because it won't sound tinny. And there's many options out there for about $25 to $50 for the wired versions. If you don't mind and you can go wireless, you get something like FIIL makes a good one for a low price. JLab is one that you can all go to Walmart and get, and they also have skin tones. So if you're doing video and you don't want to see the in-ear, you can get a skin tone for the person there. And then, of course, if you don't mind, you're going to do an over-the-ear or CAN type thing, you can just get some standard headphones and just get a whole bunch of wipes. So when somebody's done, you just wipe off the headphone and then give it to the next person.
Mickey?
Yeah, I'm assuming this would be for talent in ears and not so much requiring higher fidelity. If that's the case, if it's like one-off things with a lot of talent, we head on over to Alibaba and buy a bag of 50, 100, 200 pieces of these guys. This is just me, like 15 seconds of searching in Alibaba. I found them for like 70 or 80 cents a piece if you dig around. So if you need a lot of them, buy a bag of 100 and you're good. In terms of, and you can throw them away immediately after the talent uses them. In terms of what exactly needs to be disposed of, with something like this, we would dispose of the entire piece immediately after usage, but you can simply replace as well just the acoustic tube portion of it. And that's the piece that actually goes into the talent's ears. And you can buy, again, a bag of 100 or 200 of these if you need to do a lot of them. Now, for talents that are reoccurring that we, have to record over and over again, we would either spend for the Bumblebee Industry Sidekick or an audio implements earpiece, which is quite standard, at least like in the news industry. And a lot of people that are on camera often have their own custom molded audio implements earpiece that we just stick the transducer to.
Alex?
Yeah, pretty much what Mickey said. We use audio. We use a lot of different things. If we're doing something that's really just throwaway and it's just a couple minutes, at NAB, for instance, we just got a pack of headphones, and they were like 50 for $20 or something like that, to have those there. But they and so we had them. I think I would probably rather use the Alibaba ones that Mickey suggested. It just takes longer to get here, and I think we decided at the last minute we needed them. Audio implements is something we use a lot. Now, what you can do is the audio implements will come with a lot of little inserts that are kind of hard plastic, but they come with one that we used to call the Christmas tree. It's kind of like a little triangle with little ribs on it, and it'll kind of fit into anybody's ear. And we tend to buy those by the 50 at a time. Now, there's a little bit of theater when you're going to give someone something. Number one is we generally want enough earpieces that we can use them all day without having to clean them, so that we can. So we want to make sure that, and we put them in, even if we put these new ones into, we order small Ziploc bags and we put them into the Ziploc bag. It's important that if you're going to talent, that you open that Ziploc bag in front of them and pull it out and put it on. Even if someone is somewhere else cleaning them carefully, you want to make sure that it comes as a Ziploc bag. It comes across. There's a little bit of theater there so they feel secure in that area. Of course, you do want to make sure that you're very carefully cleaning those. In the past, we've used both alcohol and UV on them as we in the process of making sure that they're totally sterile. But usually what we do is we have 50 or 100 of these, and then they're getting clean, but they're really getting clean for the next day, not for that day. And we're simply swapping those out one at a time for talent, because a lot of times at a conference, we might be going through 5 of those at a time, 5 round people on a round table, and it'll happen every half hour. And so you're burning through a lot of them as you go through that. But we try to do that. The audio implements is very well built. If anyone has broadcast experience, as Mickey said, that's what they're going to expect. If you bring them anything less, they're going to look down on you. So a lot of this is a confidence game. And so having industry standard things, if you're dealing with folks in the industry, is usually important. My in-ears that I use every day are the KZ10s. They're just comfortable. They're not very expensive. They're not quite disposable. They're $50 each. But they are relatively clear. I don't listen to them to listen to music. I use them for in-ear monitors for this. So, and I usually have a new box of them that I use relatively often. What I like about them as a user is the quality of the audio is significantly higher than the tubes. So the clarity of it. We did an event last week in a very loud environment. So we had an SM58 with noise reduction, so we can hear the person, but they had to hear the other side clearly. And we use the KZ10s because they're going to sound the far side is going to sound clearer and more present than they would through a tube system like the audio implements or the Alibaba solution. And that was really important. So that's something else to consider.
Courtney, real quick.
Real quick, here's what I've been using for 2.5 years on here on office hours. These HYS, they're two of them for $20, so $10 a piece. Separate driver with the hollow tube earpieces, which can be replaced easily. You can buy them by the hundreds, like Mickey said. And just it's a standard security earphone replacement, which is a standard pretty much of the industry. So $10, and I've only had to transition from one set to another set once in that 2.5 years. Eventually, the cables will start to break if you're turning your head or stretching them out very much. But at $10, you can.
Mickey?
Yeah, for IEMs for, like, say, directors and or monitors for directors, script supervisors, and crew, we typically ask if they can bring their own, because it's something that they're familiar with and they know the sound of. If not, we typically supply MDR 7506 is for directors, and for everyone else, we would give them a variety of usually Sony headphones that are quite consumer headphones that are quite cheap, like $10 to $20. Another option is this Elite monitor from Halter Technical. They specifically designed these headphones for giving them out to crew members and also for the agency that likes to crowd out the Video Village. They're, I believe, about $25 each. They're so not as expensive as professional monitors, but decent quality, better than say like the dollar store stuff.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota is up next. Is there a solution to hook up an older Apollo Thunderbolt 2 interface unit to a newer Dell laptop? It only has one USB-C connector that I'm using for a dock.
Go ahead, Chris.
All right, so Apollos and Windows. This is one thing everyone should just kind of bear in mind is Apollo, for the most part, is really made just for Mac, okay? So when you're looking at Thunderbolt versus USB-C, people should understand these are not the same cable. They look the same on the outside. The guts are completely different. Some things will cross over to the other, and some things will absolutely not. So as far as I understand, I mean, they came out with a USB Windows Apollo Twin. And then I think there's the Solo as well. And I don't know. I know that there's folks, if you go into forums, that have done like Hackintoshes and kind of tweaked that stuff to make these things work. But really, these things are made to work with Mac for the most part. If you're talking about like the desktop, excluding the USB one and all the rack mounts. So just kind of bear in mind for that. I think it's not impossible if you're using an older rack mount one that you might be able to buy in the future. Maybe they would make some kind of a card that you could implement. But for the most part, I think it's really just the standalone twin is going to be your best bet on that.
Mickey.
Yeah, as Chris mentioned, the USB-C is just a connector, so it doesn't exactly describe what protocol is running through that connection on that USB-C connector. There are Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 2 adapters. This one's an Apple one, but I'm not sure if this would work with Apollos and also with Windows machines. So if you know someone that has this dongle lying around, might give it a shot, but wouldn't hold my breath.
Go ahead, Chris.
So just real quick, that won't work actually, because the problem is going to be when that adapter plugs into the actual computer, into the Dell. That's not seeing. You're still going Thunderbolt into USB-C, and so they're not going to speak the same language. So
next question.
Michelle Petia in Warsaw, Poland. And the question is, do you know a cheap Behringer CB100 microphone clamp for a violin? Thanks.
Chris.
I would just check with the manufacturer. So usually people will make options for these types of different uses. For me, any kind of clamp like situation, I'm always pretty much using DPA like the 4099s, which come with a myriad of different options, which actually do get labeled differently. So look, because the clamp version of that mic or whatever, it might have some different numbers on it just to show it's an extension of that. But just like call Sweetwater, call and ask someone who actually sells this stuff. The manufacturer might make it. There might be just like kind of a just universal adapter that you can get for it. And also remember that a lot of times you can get something that looks quality, and frequently we just kind of have to finesse and finagle these things into place if it's not like two proprietary things, and you're just kind of rigging something up. Sometimes wrapping a little gaff tape around the end of something will make that fit more securely into a slightly larger clip, things like that. So you may have to be a little inventive, but I would just check with the manufacturers.
Next question.
Mariela Zushamera in Webelow, what have you seen at the U.S. Institute for Theater Tech this year that you really want to include in your production?
This is the first time I'm hearing about this. Alex, have you seen anything?
That we know it exists. so I think this is another one where that we didn't know that conference happened, or that organization. It's just outside of our visibility, or a lot of our visibility. It looks really cool. So it is going to Columbus next year. Maybe we'll find some people that can cover it.
Next question.
Florian Berlinik in Hanoi. If using a zoom lens on the Vine camera, you need to recalibrate whenever you change the focal length. Do you need to?
Alex, what do you think?
I don't know what a Vine camera is, so I'm going to say that, but I'm going to tell you about lenses. If it's not a parafocal lens, so basically if you have a lens that has back focus, a lot of times, so these are video lenses, these are designed to be zoomed through, and so you're gonna be able to set that back focus. And what you typically do there is you set a focus chart 10 feet out. You set your focus at 10 feet, and then you dial it in so that it's sharp, and then you check it at different distances, zooming in and out, and you should be able to find that stays sharp. A standard still lens will not do that, which means that every time you zoom, you need to refocus because it's not built to hold that focus throughout the zoom. So that's what you have to kind of consider in that process.
All right. Well, that was a fantastic power hour of questions. Thanks to the wonderful producers for putting in all those wonderful questions. If we didn't answer your question, we'll make sure we bring it back on another day. Thanks, of course, to the panelists for bringing their A game today. And, of course, the incredible back-end crew that shows up 7 days a week to make sure that this show happens, to make sure everyone's prepped, and to make sure the show looks and sounds great. Thank you very much to the work that you do. Just a quick reminder, tomorrow we've got Andy Carluccio coming in for Zoom, and he's going to talk about some of the latest updates on the production tools that many of us here use, like Zoom OSC and Zoom ISO, so that should be an exciting time. That is all the time we got for today. Now, let's jump into After Hours. And of course, before I forget, the Talala Traversal, 46,000 miles, 75,000 kilometers. That's 367 million bananas for scale if we traveled around the world. We'll see you in After Hours.
That was good.
Good job, Alexander.
All these conferences that we don't know.
I know. Where are they coming out of the woodwork?
I know.
Everybody has a conference.
Hey, you have a conference, and you have a conference.
Look under your chairs, everyone. There's
there's another conference.
The International Institute of XLR Engineers show.
But this is a good example of why, if we can figure out ways to lightly cover some of these, it'd be fun to have people who take a kit out to that area and just show the expo. Because I bet you the expo at that one, at the theater technology, at the lighting technology, both of those would be a lot of fun to see. A lot of eye candy. Anyway, we'll think about that. All right, see you guys.
Yeah.
See everyone.
Take care, guys.
It's fun.
It was great.